The racism and anti-Semitism group hasn't yet met, uh, and I'd be grateful if people want to get involved in it, if they can contact me. As I said previously, I think we have to bury the myth once and for all that Labour had an anti-Semitism problem. It clearly did not. And in fact, one of the remarkable things about it is there are no victims of this massive anti-Semitism that we apparently witnessed in the Labour Party. It's an anti-Semitism which is completely victimless. And on the other hand, what it's done is ignore the very real racism in society, racism against black people, racism against Muslim people, the problem of Islamophobia. I mean, we had a new Labour government which introduced a whole raft of legislation which was targeted at Muslims, anti-terrorism legislation and so on. We had a demonisation of asylum seekers throughout the new Labour government. Yet there's been absolutely no mention of that. For example, the hostile environment policy. The Labour Party in 2014 under Ed Miliband, the parliamentary party, abstained on it, which in essence meant it supported it. Just 6 MPs, including Jeremy Corbyn, of course, opposed that legislation. So I think we really do have to be clear. Starmer, from the moment he entered as the leader, became leader of the Labour Party, made it clear that anti-Semitism was going to be the main weapon in his arsenal. And he was armed with 10 pledges from the Board of Deputies, you may remember, which candidates were invited, or not just invited, to support. And amongst those was, of course, a pledge that any Labour Party member who was seen on the same platform as someone who'd been expelled or suspended would themselves be suspended. An outrageous piece of McCarthyism, which simply went by the board. And we've seen how Starmer has used anti-Semitism, firstly to remove Rebecca Long-Bailey from the shadow cabinet, and then suspend Jeremy Corbyn indefinitely. So one of the things we have to do is we have to launch a campaign against the IHRA. The IHRA, which is the definition of anti-Semitism accepted by the Labour Party, conflates anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. In essence, if you speak out about Israeli apartheid, you are classified as an anti-Semite. There's been some very recent developments. There has, in just the past few days, been a new Jerusalem Declaration on anti-Semitism, which has been formulated by a number of leading academics. And while it's not perfect, this definition does at least target anti-Semitism, not anti-Zionism. And it makes it clear, and I think it's quite crucial, that boycott of Israel, for example, is not anti-Semitic, that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitic. And while I have differences with this definition, it is something we can work with, and it's something we can argue should replace the adoption of the IHRA. We have to say to people quite simply, if you are concerned about anti-Semitism genuinely and not about supporting Israel, then you will not adopt the IHRA, but you will adopt this definition, and then we will continue. But also, I think we need to say anti-Semitism in this society is not a significant problem. It is not a problem of state racism. Jews are not economically oppressed. Driving a car while you're Jewish is not an offence. Compared to black people who suffer disproportionate economic discrimination, who are something like 190 over the last 20 years, I believe, have died in custody, Jews are not victims of state racism. They are victims, if anything, of a marginal prejudice at best. So we again have to be clear that if the Labour Party was seriously interested in racism, anti-Semitism would be the last priority in terms of the predominant prevailing racism in this society. And really, I mean, anti-Semitism has become the false anti-racism of the right. Let us be clear. It's a way of actually avoiding the fight against anti-Semitism. And so this group, and I hope we get it off the ground, has a number of things that it has to do, firstly, dealing with the anti-Semitism problem, but also raising the profile of the fight against racism in society. We can see very clearly with the growth of the Black Lives Movement, the protest movement today, the police and crime bill, that we are in a different political situation. And Starmer has absolutely no answers to this. I have to say also, in terms of Starmer itself, what a pathetic specimen who represents the right. He symbolizes everything about the right. He has absolutely nothing to say. And in a sense, that is true of social democracy, not just in Britain, but in Europe wide. Social democracy is on the retreat. And we have to make it clear that we are the people who are going to replace it. Socialism has never been so urgent as it is today. Thank you, comrades.